Good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Derbyshire. Can you make sure we're recording?
Yes, we're all set.
Thank you. I'm one of the co-founders here at SmartSuite. Some of you have worked with me. I work with some of our strategic accounts and many of our partners. I work very closely with the team that's on the call today, and thanks to them, I'm able to provide this product. What we're going to cover today is advanced training. And so permissions, automations, and formulas as part of an interactive training today. So let's be as vocal as we need to be. You have the experts here. So your SmartSuite resources, one, of course, we have Peter Novosel, our CTO and co-founder. Many of you know him. He's definitely always the smartest guy in the room where we have lots of technical questions. I generally will haul him into my most complex meetings. And Artem is our product manager. Artem makes sure that every one of the requests that our customers bring together are considered and consolidated into a part of the product. And of course, if you've worked with me, you've also worked with Brian, who I don't think I could do my work without him. Brian is our technical onboarding specialist. He solves so many of the complex issues that come in on our intercom, and he's extremely knowledgeable about all things SmartSuite. It's a great team, and you have the best of the best here of the SmartSuite people, so please be very open with your questions. What we'd like to do today is perhaps, for some people, a quick SmartSuite presentation so you understand what you're looking at and what we've put together for you. And then we're going to break the training into 3 areas, as we showed on the polling. Artem's going to cover roles and permissions, Peter's going to cover advanced automations, and then Brian has formulas and calculations. Stay tuned because I believe we have some handouts at the end, and we'll have an open discussion at the end as well. Who is this session really intended for? All of our customers and partners are always welcome to any of our sessions, our training, etc. However, please understand that the people who asked for this are SmartSuite administrators and solution creators, and many of our SmartSuite partners and certified consultants. That doesn't mean you can't stay if you're not one of those 2 groups. It just means that this might be a little bit more intense than our general training resources. And Emma, if you could put these in the chat, we have the SmartSuite Academy for anyone who wants to join and self-serve training. We also have our certification training offered once per month at no charge, and you can sign up for that. It's the last Thursday of every month. It's about 4 to 6 hours with a certification exam at the end. And then we also, by request, we create bespoke custom SmartSuite solution training sessions for customers. Those are not at no charge. However, I think if you partake in all of the training that I just mentioned, you'd be fine, absolutely ahead of the curve. So part 1, again, Artem's going to review permissions, and we are going to have you ask those questions in between everything he's showing. So please don't be shy. This isn't a presentation. This is interactive. I can't stress that enough. And the one thing that I'd really like to do is have us look at a SmartSuite implementation and just understand what we're seeing. So Artem, if you would like to take over sharing, and just when you open the SmartSuite workspace, just let people know what they're looking at. That would be really helpful, especially for anyone who's not seen SmartSuite before. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I'll be talking about roles, permissions, and their applications within the system. And yeah, we will be covering the parts of SmartSuite as we go, but I would like to split my speech, so to speak, in 2 parts. So first, I think about 7 to 10 minutes, I want to give you a little bit of theory, like explaining all these concepts and what they are. And then within the other part, we'll see how they really apply within the system, what you can do with it, and what are the nuances and all that. I hope it's okay with everybody.
Excellent.
Yeah. Let me put the timer so I don't speak for the entire hour. When we say roles and permissions, those 2 things often come together. Although in terms of SmartSuite, it's really important to understand the difference between those two. The roles and permissions, they are not the same. They are connected, they are not the same. So let me start with the roles because they set the scene for everything else that we're going to talk about. Every SmartSuite user, every member of the workspace will have one role. So that's a must. It's like you have an email, you have a name, and then you will have a role. And this role will, in many ways, define what you can or cannot do within the workspace, right? We don't have a lot of them. We only have 4 roles. And if we go to the workspace administration or the manage members, that's a nice place where you can see those roles available. So we have account admin, solution creator, general access, and a guest. And we're going to go top to bottom, starting with account administration. That's very easy, in fact. So this role is the top of the top, right? That's the person who has access to each and every part of the system, every record, every field. There are literally no restrictions to that role. And also it's important to understand that only account admins, at least for now, can invite other people to the workspace. They can remove other people from the workspace. And they can also manipulate with workspace settings. They can change the planning, change the payment plan, all that. So that's all about the account admin. And another important thing to understand is that this role is indifferent to any permissions. This person is just top of the top, as I said. Then solution creator and general access, these would be probably the most frequently used roles, and they're actually for the real people. And whoever has this role, it doesn't say much about like the role itself. It doesn't define anything because a user with a general access role, the access rights of that user will really depend on the permissions that you assign to that user within every specific solution or table or a field. So that's hence the name general access. It just says, okay, this is just a user. And then depending on various places in the system, this person can or cannot do certain things. And then if we speak of solution creator, that's actually the same thing as the general access, but there's a slight adjustment where we say, okay, these are the people who have the permission or they have an ability to create new solutions. So when we go back to the homepage, we will see there's a button to create a new solution. So basically, it's only the account admin or a solution creator user who will have an access to that button. Although it's, again, an important thing to understand that even being a solution creator doesn't guarantee that you will keep the ownership of solutions that you've created for your lifetime, because you can lose that access, and it all depends, again, on the permissions you will have in a particular solution. I hope it makes sense. And finally, a guest. That's a funny, interesting role because it's a mix. It's a mix of a role and the permissions, kind of both in one. So the meaning here, first of all, this thing is free of charge, the only one of all I mentioned above. So guest users, once they get into the workspace, they will only have access to solutions that you explicitly let them have access to. And once they are in, they will be able to view the records that have been assigned to them, and only those records. But not only they can view them, they will also be able to change certain fields within those records. Namely, that will be the status field and the checklist field. And plus, they will be able to leave the comments in those records. So the most frequent example would be if you want to let your customers into the workspace and they don't necessarily need to do any work, but they will just come in and approve a project that you assign to them. And that's all they can do, or they can view the record and read the details of the project. So these are the roles. And now let's jump into our homepage and see how we can actually apply permissions on top of those roles, right? So we will create a new solution, start from scratch, and jump into the section for permissions. And let's quickly run through the settings that we have here. So every solution that you create would by default be set to private to me. So this is done so that while you're building that solution, other people just don't see it. You can do whatever you need. And then once you're ready, you can let other people in. How do you do that? You have these two kind of quick options. So all members have full access. You can check this. If you don't really bother about the permission levels, and you just say, okay, everybody who is in the workspace, they can see the solution, and having the full access, we'll discuss it in a moment, but basically it means that everybody can edit every record, every field, they will see everything, and so on. Another option here would be, it gives a little bit more flexibility. You can say, no, I don't want to let everybody in, but I want to specify some teams that will have access to the solution. And I skipped it in the first phase, but actually you can group your members into teams, say sales, marketing, support team, technical support, all that. And then you can use those groups of users to assign permissions to them. But what it gets really interesting is when we switch to this advanced permissions section, because here we get an ability to really control the level of access on the user or on the team level with multiple options. And we will get back to these options in a second, but I just want to state that not only we can set up these permissions on the solution level, we can also do that. We can also bring it one step further. And let's say I would put it like this: all members have full access. I will create another table. And starting with the Pro plan, so Pro, Enterprise, and Signature, you also get an ability to further specify these permissions for every table independently. And then the way to do it would be to go here, again, the permissions, and you'll see by the default, every table just says, okay, I will inherit whatever was set up on the solution level. But you can then override it and say, okay, out of those people that I said have access to the solution, I can then further specify that although everybody have full access to the entire solution, Brian will be, let's say, a viewer in this particular table. And then in this case, my demo user will have an editor access. And now what this means that we have just cut off everyone that we said have access to the solution itself, and basically limited access to table 2 only to this demo user, and also limited access to table 1 to Brian only. So that's a really flexible way of setting up. We have a large solution with a lot of tables, and it's just not enough to be able, the permissions that you set up on the solution level are just not enough. You have to be really more precise with them. Okay, and another thing that I have to mention is this section down here, solution managers. So the solution managers, you have to think of them as a local admin of the solution. So this is the person who has the entire control over this specific solution. So they can add fields, add records, kick in and out users, do all that. So that's the solution manager. And finally, another place where you can work with permissions would be, so solution, table, and then you have the field level. And again, this feature is available for Pro and Enterprise accounts. And in order to access it, you will go here into the field permissions. And with these two settings, you can control whether the field should be visible or not. And then you can specify, you can hide this field from a group of users or only show this field to a group of users. And also you can control if that field should be editable or it should remain read-only. Again, it can be read-only for specific users and then editable for everyone else. So these are the 3 levels of permissions. And once we have it, let's quickly look at the options that we have right here. So full access is a simple one. So that's basically you just say this person can do anything except for adding fields, deleting fields. That's what we call modifying the structure of the table. So they can see all the records, they can delete all the records, they can edit all the records. They can also create views, and both public and private. Then viewer and commenter are also very simple, because essentially what it means that these people can still see all the records, but they will never be able to edit any of them. So these are just view-only roles, but the only difference is that commenter can also add comments, while viewers cannot. They will just be looking at the records, and that's it, right? And then we have these three that people often get confused about, but in fact, they totally make sense. So editors are people who we say they can create the records, and they can also edit the records that they have created. But everything else remains read-only for them. That's the limitation. While contributor is basically the same thing. They can create records, and they can edit the records they've created. But also, if somebody assigns a record to them, contributor gets the right to edit that record. And finally, the assignee is someone, and that's the important thing. So here we have a cutoff in the amount of records that this person will see. So they can only see records that have been assigned to them. And as we see here, they will be able to also edit those records, and then everything else will be hidden from them. So you see that these various permissions give you different angles and setting, like in a way you can set up an access to the data. And moving on to the second part, which will be more a practical overview.
Artem, before you move on to your second part, and I'd love to see that, we have a couple of questions in the questions section that maybe we can answer at the end as well. One of them is, as with the permissions that you've created or allow, who can create automations?
Automations are available for solution managers only.
Okay.
So you have to be a solution manager within a certain solution to be able to access this automations menu, because we consider it is, again, you're a local admin within a solution. Yeah.
Okay. And we have a bigger question, I think, that we can answer at the end for Peter. Peter Rossenlong is asking, are there plans to implement the ability to turn your workspace admin users into a table of users within your solution and apply custom filtering and permissions from an admin panel? And so that we can table that for now, but I think that's been a common request about how to see across the entire workspace permissions and so forth. So Artem, we'll let you keep going, and we'll get back to Rawson's question later. Okay.
Yeah, all right. Perfect. As we just discussed, there are multiple ways of setting up different permissions within various tables. And I thought that building up a dashboard will be the best illustration of how all these things can work together, because as in SmartSuite, you can link multiple solutions and multiple tables with each other across the entire system. And the dashboard would be the best example of it, because you will see I've created widgets that are pulling data from everywhere, and they are all connected to linked records. But the cool thing here is that when you build it, all those links, when they come together here on the dashboard, they would still respect all the permissions that we've set there on the source data, on permission, on solution level, on the table level, and on the field level. And these are just the examples that will show you how it actually happens and what are the different use cases that you might end up having. So this is the dashboard. Imagine I call it a control panel, something that you will have a general overview of a company. So here on this tab, we have accounts and contacts. Then we have something that relates to support, like feature requests and customer bugs. And at the end, we have orders and invoices. And I will now switch to my demo user. But before I do, I just want to explain the setup a little bit. You can see that I've explicitly indicated a type of permission that this demo user will have to a particular table. So no access to invoices. In others, it will be a commenter. And then we have accounts assignee, contacts editor. Okay, so let's see how it goes. Okay, I'm now connected as a demo user, and I'm going back to the same account. So let's start with an assignee here. So pay attention to this field here, account manager assigned to demo user. Now, if we switch back for a second to my initial dashboard where I'm an account manager, you will see that I have 10 records in total and different account managers assigned to those records. But when I'm logged in as a demo user, I will only have 5 because only those 5 are assigned to me as an account manager. So that's an illustration of an assignee permission, right? And also here, when I have a chart that calculates these accounts by type, again, the original shows me all of them here. When I switch here, when I switch to the demo user, I will only see the portion of accounts that relate to me, basically. Okay, then if we move down to the editors section, first of all, remember, editors cannot modify records that they did not create. So in this example here, all of the records were created by Nate, and you can see that they are read-only for me. I cannot do anything with them. I can still create a new one though, because I am an editor here. And the first tricky part here comes when I will try to link an account to this contact. So when I click plus, you will see that again, the list of accounts that I can choose from is limited by my permissions that I have in the accounts table. So again, as I'm editor in contacts, but because I am an assignee in the accounts, I will only get the list of accounts that I have access to. So I can select this one, link it, and create a new record. However, if you pay attention to the list of accounts that are shown here, you will see that it shows me a mix of my accounts, but also those that are assigned to Nate and maybe other people. Well, why is that? Again, because this widget pulls data from the contacts table where I am an editor. So this limitation to cut off the accounts, it does not apply here, right? It will just expose all the data that sits there. Although, if I will make an attempt, let's say we'll pick this contact here. So this account is linked to Nate, which means I don't see it in my list over here up above. Now, what happens if I will try to access it? Nothing, right? And that's exactly the power of this whole connections, because it will apply the permissions that I have in the accounts. It will see that this one is just not accessible for me, and it will cut my access right there. That's a good illustration, I guess. Okay, moving on to support tab. This one is really simple, so I would probably skip it. As a viewer, I can view all the records. I cannot edit them. But here, as a contributor, you can see it's a mix of records that are assigned to me and not assigned to me. And immediately in the same table, like this one is read-only, this one is assigned to me. Okay, I can change it, no problems. Okay, and finally, let's move to these orders and invoices example. It shows some extreme cases here. So invoices, as I mentioned previously, this user does not have any access to the table. That's why we get this message from the widget, like no data will be shown. But in the orders table, I am a commenter, which means I can see all the orders. And here on the orders, we have a link to an invoice. So actually this field pulls data from this table that I am not able to see. And again, it's important to understand the logic of how permissions operate. So they will not clear these values out. They will still show me that there is an invoice, number 1 and 3. And not only that, I also have a roll-up field, total invoiced, which sums up invoices from here. And this data will also be shown to me in this table, just because being a commenter in orders gives me ability to see all the records and all the fields. So this is something that solution managers have to keep in mind when they are using lookups and rollups pulling data from tables that contain some sensitive data, right? If you want this field to be totally protected, you would then need to use field permissions and really explicitly hide this field from users or group of users that should not be able to see it, right? And I guess I'm running out of time, but there was another example that I wanted to mention that refers to field permissions. So again, on the orders table, I have a special field that I called sales rep commission. And the field permissions I set here they're explicitly hiding this field from my demo user. So I'm not supposed to see it. And when I go to the orders table, indeed, you can see that I cannot see this field. Yeah, it's not there. It's indeed hidden. But again,
if I may,
when
so important. Go on. I'm sorry. I just want to emphasize that one particular item is if you are not permitted to see that field, you will not see it in linked records. You will not see it in the fields to display. You will not even know it exists. And that's a very important piece. So Artem, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Please go on.
No, thank you. It's a very important note. So the way it works is that the backend on the database level, it just cuts off that field. So it just never travels to your browser and it just nowhere to be hidden. It just cuts it right at the root, right? But again, my orders are linked to the accounts. And then on the accounts table here, let me just put it to full screen mode. I have a roll-up field that says, for this account, bring me the sum of all commissions from all the orders that are linked to that account. And again, I, as assignee, happen to have access to this account. I have access to those orders because in the orders table, I'm just a commenter, so I can see all the data. And this rollup will still bring the data. Yeah, because even though I don't have access to the source field that it pulls the data from, the rollup itself is visible for me. Yeah, if I click here and try to access the data, show me the record. Yeah, that's all I get. Yeah, so I will not be able to see any details, the actual field value from the orders, but the rollup is exposed. So that's just a nuance that I wanted to emphasize that everybody should be aware of. And then final. So again, even though I am a commenter in orders, which means I cannot modify anything in this table, but because linked records work both ways, it's still possible to modify the order, because if I'm in the accounts and I pick the accounts that I can change, I can take my order and I can unlink it, which in fact will result in updating this order in the orders table, yeah, because the backlink to my account will disappear. So again, even though I'm not able to modify the order itself, having the ability to modify the account will still gives me access to modify this link between those two records. So
Okay.
Again, another thing.
We have questions. We have questions, and we need your expertise. I'm so sorry. I just want to keep us on good time.
I'm done.
Foremost, we have questions about the dashboard options that are being shown on this beautiful dashboard, Mr. Product Manager. This dashboard is showing tabs across the top, and while we use these in-house, they are currently in beta and behind a feature flag, but coming very soon, and so many more beautiful attributes of this dashboard. Artem, you've worked so hard on this with the team. Is there anything else you want to add about dashboard tabs or any of that stuff, or do we want to just not talk about it on this call?
It's a whole separate discussion, but yeah, as you said, we have a bunch of stuff coming in for dashboards, and I'm so excited about it. It will be just mind-blowing. And I don't want to tease you, but this is just like tabs and banners. It's the top of the iceberg. There will be so much.
Okay, so back to permissions, and this is a valid question. Dimitri has a great question. If we have two assigned to fields, and they are assigned to two different users, field 1 assigned to user 1 and field 2 assigned to user 2, how will the permissions work in this regard?
It's a good question. So if you are working with assignee permission, then both users will see the record. because they are assigned to a record. It doesn't matter. One person uses assigned to one, the other one uses assigned to number two, but both of them will be treated as assignees, right? But there's a way to make it a little bit more concrete. And this is a special permission that we have. Okay, let me switch to the admin mode. This is a special permission that we have on the table level only. And this one is called assignee plus here. So if you remember, we didn't have it in the list of permissions on the solution level, but now we are on the table level, we have it here. It's different in a sense that for assignee plus, you will be able to specify the assigned to field that it needs to look up to understand if the assignment has happened or not, right? And in this case, if you have assigned to fields, you can say this one is the one that generates an assignment. The other one should be ignored. And another difference between a regular assignee and assignee plus is that as these guys will also be able to create new records. It's like an additional option that they get. While assignees can only view the records, view and edit the records that have been assigned.
All right. So I know that you're in the polling that we did in the beginning, you didn't get a lot of the votes, but I think this was a great session. I think we had great questions. We will have more questions at the end where we will try to answer all of those. And please stick around because Artem and the team will be able to answer those questions. I'd like to move on, if I may, to Peter Novosel. Thank you again, Artem. It was wonderful. Peter is going to talk about automations. This is where we get so many of our questions on the support channel and also our feature requests. So Peter, so happy you're here. Thank you so much. Please give us your demonstration.
Absolutely. Let me get my screen shared here. Is that coming through?
It is.
Okay. I will try to move right along and just assume that everyone has at least a little bit of background in automations because the list of things that people wanted me to touch on is pretty long. Let's jump right into it. As automations is linked at the solution menu level. And again, this is accessible by anyone who's a solution manager or an admin. Always keep in mind admins have access to everything. So here we've got our list of automations. The first one that we're going to dive into is the merge records action, which let me step back here for just a second. If you've been tracking with our new feature updates, this is one that had received a lot of community votes. Everyone was looking for a way to do this. So this is kind of part one of what we're going to do here is having an automation action that will actually merge records. We've also been asked for a more kind of user interactive version, and we're going to get to that with a scripted extension, which again is a whole different topic that we'll probably have a session on here in the coming months. But let's look and see. I've got one that's pre-created here, just to give you context. So we're going to operate out of your standard contact table in a CRM. So we've got names and email addresses, notes, phone numbers, and that sort of thing. So when you've got a whole bunch of these, it can get really interesting trying to keep things deduplicated. And that's where the merge action comes in. Here you can see, and I want to point out too, you can run this action off of a variety of different triggers. So here I've got it on when record is created, which is only going to run this merge action when you're creating the new record and all of your conditions match. So keep that in mind. You could just as easily run this off of an update action or other things if it's appropriate to your use case. And if we have time at the end, we can cover a couple of those where you more or less create your own manual deduplication process. But let's just take a look at what it takes to do this in an automated way. So if you've got a tremendous number of contact records, maybe you just care about email, right? So email is your unique identifier. When anything comes in, when I get a new record where the email is not empty, so I've got an email value, I want to run this action. So here, just like any other SmartSuite action, you're going to specify a table. In this case, this is locked. It's coming off of the trigger. So we're just going to take the table context right from the trigger. It's repeated here so that you can see and have the context of where you're at when you're creating this. The most important thing here is the matching criteria. And in this case, I'm just saying email, but I could just as well say, I want to match where email and phone are exactly the same. Those records are going to be identified when they've got exactly the same values, and that's going to kick off the merge. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as email. And then this is interesting. So these merge actions tell the system what to do with your data. An important point is the first record, the oldest record in the system, is the one that is going to get merged into. So think about it in that context. You've already got a record for Joe Smith. You get another Joe Smith record with the same email address. Okay, we're going to combine those two. These actions tell you how to do it. And depending on the field type, you may have some of these options grayed out because they're only single value, so append wouldn't make sense. But generally, you're going to be able to either say, ignore this value. I don't want to update it at all when a new record comes in and gets merged, or I want to replace or append the value. So things where you have multiple items like multiple select lists and linked records, you could say just append this. Even multiple email addresses and phones can be appended this way. Or I want to take the new one every time and I want to replace what's currently in there. Okay, that's all there is to it. Those are the options for that merge action. I've already got this one set up, so you can see the results. If we go back into the record itself, move my toolbar around. Okay, so I have a Peter Novosel record here with Peter at SmartSuite, and my department is testing. If I go and add a new record, so keep in mind, this is happening on the create. So I'm going to create my Peter Novosel 2. I'm going to specify the same email address. But I'm going to update some things. Maybe I'm now in the QA department. I'm going to notes go here. And let's give me a phone number. Okay. So I create my brand new record. And you'll see that it shows up for a minute. And then magically, this first record was updated. I can now see that the record is named Peter Novosel 2. I've got my notes, I've got the new phone number, and my department has been replaced. So again, this is very handy in keeping a mass of records, whether they're contacts or maybe you have product IDs or something where you've got a large volume of these things that can be very specifically identified. You don't want to have multiples, just set up your merge action and it will keep things organized and up to date for you. Okay, so let's back out of that. And another area that I get a lot of questions is the use of the find action. And let's take a look at this. I've got a scenario set up here in software development. And so here's a typical use case where you have one table that's storing records. In this case, I'm storing bugs or defect records. I want to assign some values based on something that's linked to this record. In this case, it's something that we're calling epic. It's basically the area of the product that it's affected. If I drill into that, I can see that I've got a primary developer for this area. So automations, okay, Brian needs to get assigned. But when I create another bug, I would have to go in and manually select that dashboards area and then say, oh, look at it and say, oh, okay, that's Brian, I'll assign Brian and do that manually. Instead, we can automate all of this. So let's go take a look at this automation configuration. This assign bug to Epic primary developer. And we're going to hit a couple of things here. So I'm going to set a condition where we only want this to fire. And this is on matches condition. So it's going to fire on new record creation or updates when these conditions match the first time they start matching. And that's another concept that is important to keep in mind, is that the intention of the matches condition trigger is to pick up on things when they begin to match that condition. Not every time they match that condition, because I want this action or set of actions to happen one time. So I want it to happen when Epic is not empty, meaning I've got a value there, and assigned to is empty. And in that case, what I'm going to go do is use a new feature of the find records action, which is being able to use the result of a single record find. So here I'm identifying exactly one record that I want to match the criteria that I specify. In this case, I want to find the epic that's named whatever the epic is called in my linked record, find that record, and then use it in the context of this record update. I want to assign that found epic's primary developer. And when you press on the plus here, after we've got this configured, and right now this only works with single record find. So keep that in mind too. This is where you're trying to find a specific item that you can explicitly identify, or at least filter to, or sort order to the one being at the top is the one that you want. When I click this top button, I can see the get associated epic record, which is what I called my find. I've got all of these values available for assign to. Again, these are just the values that are compatible with this field. So it's going to go grab that value and update my record. We used to have to do a few workarounds where you're updating the linked record and it reflects back. Just not very convenient for some particular workflows. So now if I come in here and say, yep, this thing is dashboard, and we give it a second, it's going to fill in Brian for us. And there he is. Another thing to keep in mind too is that you can always come in here and take a look at the history, and you're going to see the run history. Also, if you're on a smaller screen, I'm on a MacBook Air right now, some of the detail may not be shown. Remember that you can scroll, you can click on that detail button, and it will give you the results of what it found, the record IDs, and all of that kind of good stuff. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're building. Let's move on then to, we're going to combine we'll use one stone with the proverbial two birds. I've been asked about the add comment action, which is another one that we've recently added. I'm going to combine that with taking a look at ways that we can template record creation. So in many workflows, you have a primary record. And in this case, this is a marketing plan. I've got some kind of a new plan, and based on its type, I may want to create other records like this content request, this image request, which each have their own workflows. Now, yes, you could come in here and do that manually, another plan, and I could go create those records and link them. But in this case, we can automate it, and I set one up here so you can see we're either doing content creation, content with images, or existing content promotion. In this case, I'm keying off of content creation with images, and you take a look at the automation that drives this. Move my zoom bar around again. Let's take a look at this flow. So here, again, I'm using another matches condition trigger. We're going to look for The type is equal to content creation with images. And then I want to see that these are empty because maybe I've already filled some in manually. I don't want to overwrite that. So I'm going to make sure that those are empty before I go ahead and I create both of those records. And we recently, Artem will have to maybe help me out. We increased the number of actions that you can have here. So you can actually create a whole bunch of records as part of this one flow. And in this case, I'm just naming it image request. I'm giving it the title of the triggering record, and then I'm linking back to the plan. So I'm establishing that linked record. Same thing here with this one to the content record. And now here at the very end, and I think that this is typical of the use of the create comment action. It's a separate action type. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm just adding a note to the original record saying, hey, template records were created. So this thing was template driven. It wasn't manually configured, just so that you have that information available. Again, you select the table, we select the trigger, and again, you can either feed it from the triggering record or from a find, and then attach the comment. You can even assign the owner. And if you have an attachment somewhere in the context of this flow, you can attach it here too, either from a files and images field or from the create PDF, which we're going to see here in a minute. When I've got all of this together, we come back out to this part of our flow. I can say, yep, this is another content creation, and I can see those records get added and linked for me. And then a second later, we've got our comment, and oh, by the way, it's assigned to me because I'm the owner of this record.
Peter, really quickly, there's some questions, and
Sure.
and I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I think it's important. One of our users has asked, is this automation for the comments for single records only? Or can you do this for multiple records if you have a swath of records that meet a condition?
The comment action, I actually haven't configured it that way, but I know that you can trigger it from a find. So let's add, we're going to create comment. We're finding records in, let's say, content. When we change this selector to content, now I've got my records coming in from the find action. Yeah, you can tag a bunch of them with that same comment.
Excellent. So that I think you just answered both questions. James Malin had a question about what if it were multiple records? And we had someone else who asked the same thing. So I think that's wonderful. I think that's it for now. If you want to, oh, there is one, and you might be coming to this. But in the QA on automations, is there a feature in the automation settings that allows for adjusting all subsequent rows in a date column automatically when the date in the first row is modified?
So by row, I'm assuming we're talking about individual records. There isn't any sort of a cascade. You need a linkage between the records, or you have to be able to get them in a find. Right. So you could find against a date range and get a list of records and take some action against that list of records. But it wouldn't be like an incremental thing like you would. You can do some of this just in grid, where we try to recognize patterns when you're dragging the selector, and it'll try to repeat the pattern, similar to Excel and Google Sheets and that sort of thing. But not as much with automations right now. You need that specific record context, as opposed to modify everything with a date that's after this. That's a use case that we don't yet accommodate. It would be a use case that you could probably address with a scripting action, which is on the roadmap, not to take us down a rabbit hole, but that is coming up soon. We're working on it, and then you'll be able to apply additional logic to find records and make those updates as needed.
That's a $10 fine. You said the S word.
Yeah, that's right. I'll put my dollar in the jar.
All right, please carry on.
If there aren't other questions immediately. I just want to build on this particular thing to point something else out, because let's see where I have it here. If we go back over into our sales CRM and go to accounts, I linked these solutions together. So here I've got a link to the table that we were just in, that plans table in the marketing solution. And what I want to do is make it easy for our product marketing people to say, hey, I'm working with this account. I want to spotlight this account. And what spotlighting is in my marketing world might mean creating a bunch of materials and some sort of marketing plan. I want an easy way to do that. So I put together an automation that just looks at a yes, no button click, takes that value, and it's going to go run. You can see the record just popped up. Let me show you the automation real quick. What it's going to do is say just a very simple trigger. When account spotlight changes to yes, I want to create a record. And basically what it's doing is it's kicking off the automation we were just looking at. So it's creating this account spotlight plan record, setting its type to content creation with images, which in turn kicks off the other automation. And you can see the results of this if we drill into this record. You can see it also created those other two content records, and it did the comment. All of that was initiated by me automatically creating the record, which creates additional records plus the comment. So the takeaway is that you can kick off cross-solution automations that easily. Just by doing something that triggers the other action, you can have a cascade effect. And now I've got my plan created and all of its constituent parts and automatically linked for me in one button click instead of literally dozens of point and click actions.
So Peter, just to reiterate, you were able to go across multiple solutions with your automations, with an action in one solution, triggering actions in other solutions, as long as you have the ability to create those automations and you have access to do.
Yep, that's right. Now, keep in mind, when you're configuring the individual automations, you can often pick solution and table. So you're not typically limited when you're in the configuration interface, but you can have one automation in one solution, create the events that drive an automation that fires in a separate solution. Anything's possible. Solution is no barrier as long as you have the permissions to configure it.
It's a beautiful thing. And so there is a way to tell the automations in which order to go. Like first do this, then do this, then do this.
They are event driven. So when the event happens, the automation is going to trigger. So if you need to do multiple things, you have to think through, all right, what do I want to do first? So what is the least dependent thing down to the most dependent thing? So in this case, this click is creating the plan with the right conditions that kicks off the second automation. So you just have to think of it in that way. Again, event-driven, this click drives the automation that creates the record, which is the event that triggers the second automation.
Okay. And so while you're talking about that, we have a question, and I'm not sure if I understand the context of the question, but you may. Can a switch kick off an automation only once, even if the switch is turned off and back on again? I don't know if they mean by, I'll let you, please.
Let me address that in the context of, and I know we're getting close to time, but there's one other that I just have to show you.
Right.
And that has, let me see where I put this. This is in brand asset. Okay. We now have the ability to create a PDF as part of an automation. and that PDF can either be the default PDF output, like if you're going to go and export a record to PDF, you get a default format, or you can use a document design. And in this case, I did just a very basic one to kind of show some of the possibilities here. We now support multiple images and all kinds of good stuff. Topic of another one of these sessions, one of these days. But what this means is that you can automatically generate that PDF and attach it to the record, use it in emails, wherever you can use a file attachment, attach it to a comment. That's also possible. So let's remove this one. And to address the checkbox question, so here I'm going to check this to turn on the automation, basically saying I'm using this like a button to say, hey, I want to go trigger this automation. Oh, but that it turned off. That's because in the automation, I'm turning it back off when I'm done. So I could actually do this again if I wanted to. And if I have this set to append the PDFs, it will keep generating PDF after PDF. Maybe you have them time-stamped or date-stamped or whatever. That is totally possible. But that's a technique that we use all the time. And let me show you how it looks here. So when generate PDF, which is a yes/no field, changes from no to yes, I'm kicking this off. And the first thing that I'm going to do is generate a PDF. You have, again, the ability to say, I either want the export record page, which is our default PDF format, which may be fine if you just want a quick export of something. But more than likely, if you're sending this out as a templated document, you're going to select one of those document designer templates. Any of the ones that have been created and stored are going to be listed here. In this case, I just have one. And then you also have the ability to build up the name of the title. And that's where I was saying, maybe you want to use today's date or something of the sort to identify when that document was generated. Once you've done that, and here I'm just using our standard update record action, triggering on this trigger, I want to append my exported PDF to this generated PDFs. This is an important and recent enhancement I want to highlight here as well. You now have the ability for several different types of fields to replace the value, append the value, or clear the value. I believe that it defaults to replace. So if you don't want to nuke what's already in there, make sure you switch it to append. You can also use the same field to clear a value, which may be handy in certain conditions where something happens, you want to reset this field. You can now do that with the clear value option. But in this case, I'm appending the PDF, which shows up in, again, when you click this button, you can see all of the different sources, and I want to use data from the action generate PDF. And you're just going to get this exported PDF pill, put it right in there, and then I'm replacing the value of my generate PDF yes/no field with no to reset it. And you saw the results of this. It basically, you toggle it on, it generates the file, it attaches the file, and it resets the value back to off.
Peter, this is amazing. Everyone is cheering in the comments section. I'd like to have a couple of questions answered, if I may. Is there a roadmap item to add 2 triggers on match conditions and at a scheduled time, for example?
So let me understand the question. You want essentially the same flow to trigger either on certain conditions or at a scheduled time.
Peter, just to clarify on that, one of his earlier questions was asking about sending an automation at a specific date and time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what he's asking, of being able to have it trigger based on conditions and the date happening.
Gotcha. In fact, I think I have one of those set up. So we do have an add a scheduled time trigger. So here, let me back out for just a second. Let's say we have a status of archived, and we want to do certain things like filter those out because you only want to see your completed items for a certain amount of time. Then you want to archive them and ignore them from day-to-day reporting. You can do that in an automated way with the add a scheduled time trigger, which allows you to say how often it repeats, when it starts, what days of the week, and at what time to execute. From there, because this fires without context, right? The context is, hey, my time increment has said I need to go do something. What do I need to do? So to give it record context, you have to use a find to go say, all right, in this case, what I'm trying to do here is I want to find records where the status is equal to complete and the last updated is less than 5 days. It's basically 5 days ago or more. So when those two things are true, I'm going to replace my status value with archived. And that will run every time one of these time increments hits. So I could say, I want to run this every Friday. I want to run it all weekdays, whatever it is, you can configure this to fire on that scheduled frequency.
So we have, I knew this was coming. Gina asked, can you set a loop in automations? Example, creating a record for each of the 54 weeks of the year with an automation. 52, I would imagine. But yeah.
Very soon. Very soon. We're working on two major enhancements. One is looping, so that you can iterate something, right? You can take my list of linked records or whatever you're feeding into it and do something per item. The other part of that is conditional execution. And I can't tell you how many people have asked for this. I'm excited to have it because now you're not going to have to set up an automation per unique combination of things. You can say, do this if this condition, or do this if the other condition, or do this if this other condition, which will be really handy in just sorting through the various settings that you need to make based on some properties of the thing that you're looping through. So both those are in the works, and we're talking weeks, not months, coming very soon.
So the next and last question before we get to Brian, because I know formulas are very important. Do automations always honor the time zone of the user that set up the automation or the workspace time zone?
Great question. Neither. This was such a problem in understanding and context that we are actually setting the time zone explicitly at the automation level. It defaults to what your workspace time zone is. Or Artem, maybe help me out. Or Brian, does it default to user profile or workspace default?
Does the user profile of
User
who created the
profile. Okay.
automation.
So in the context that you're operating, in my case, I'm in central time zone, so this would be the default. But if I wanted to specifically say that this ran in Pacific time or whatever, I could specify that here, and it will always run in that time zone. So a great question, important to know. This is giving it the time zone context so that you know exactly what Sunday at 5 p.m. means, in Central Time.
So we do have one last question, and then we have to move on.
I want to actually go back to Dimitri's question.
Okay.
Peter, could
Thank
you also really quickly show using when a record matches a condition with a date and how that can trigger based on a date being met in the record?
Yes, let's.
Thanks, Brian. I missed that one.
Let's find a date. Okay, we have a date. And we can create matches condition. I'm really fighting my Zoom toolbar. So
Yes.
this,
Go ahead.
yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Dimitri, I just wanted to say, when you have this record matches a condition and you're comparing to a date relative to, Peter, if you click on that plus and you have the options of today, yesterday, all those kind of options there, that will respect if there's a time in the record. So if you say the due date and time is Friday at 5 p.m., the automation will wait until exactly 5 p.m. before it takes that action. And you can use that plus and minus on the side there to offset if you want it to do 2 days before today or after today or anything like that.
Yeah, important to keep in mind, this can be negative. A lot of people didn't realize that you can put a negative number in there to go backwards from the date that you specify here.
All right.
And so this is great for if you want to send out those reminder emails or nudge people on getting their stuff done. If the status is still in progress and the due date's tomorrow, you can send them that email or anything like that.
Yep, and this date can be a formula as well. So if you're outputting a date as formula output, you can use that and it will recognize that it's a date, and then you'll have all of these date type operations available.
Excellent. All right. I'm so
All right.
sorry. Well, this is a big part of our show today, but we want to get to the next piece. Thank you so much, Peter. Brian
Absolutely.
Dollen will be talking about formulas, and there's a couple of things that we have as handouts after Brian's piece where you can actually download a template with our latest formulas and some really cool cheat sheet kind of things. Brian, if you want to get going, please do.
Yeah, let me
Take it
share
away,
my
Brian.
screen just 1 second. All right, I'll zoom in just a little bit. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, just making sure. And so I only have a couple formula examples, but I think they're going to take a little bit to go over and they'll probably lead into plenty of questions as well. And so the first one I wanted to go over is this days to complete formula we have here. And what this is doing is looking at any of our statuses that we consider to be complete. And then if it is considered complete, we want to get the difference in work days from when it was created to either when the status was last updated or when we've actually marked it as completed in a date field. Otherwise, we leave that empty. And so you can see because this record specifically is still ongoing, we have that days to complete blank. But then if you scroll down here to one that's been released, we can see it took 1 day to complete. And one of the things, or a couple of things I wanted to show with this too, the ability to comment on formulas is really useful and really great for those people that are going to have to work on these formulas after you, or even later you, that's not going to remember what you set up or how you set it up.
That would never happen to you, Brian.
Yeah, so it's very handy, very good to do. Anything after that pound sign will be ignored until you explicitly hit enter to make a new line. And so even if this text were to go down to a new line, this is still going to be ignored. The other thing to mention is within an if statement and you're doing this check, you can have an or inside of it and have multiple conditions. You can mix that with and as well and any other things. And then one other thing that's good too is if you actually do want the field to be blank, in this case, we're returning a number if it's true. And so to return a blank number if it's false, then we just do this number function and just put those empty quotes. Because that number function will try to turn the text into a number. And then overall, we're just rounding it out to the nearest whole number so we can have a nice, clean, rounded day.
May I add something just really quickly?
Mhm.
Not sure if everybody's aware, but when you were using an OR as a function, you can have also used an OR as an operator, which for a lot of people might simplify the overall look and syntax of the formula.
Same with
Yeah.
and. Any of the
Yeah, I can
logic.
show that really quickly. So yeah, if you don't want to use the OR function, you can also, as Artem said, use it as an operator and just say outright status is released or verified by QA or not a bug. And so you would just use that and or after each option that you're wanting to check. And it'll still calculate that same way. And you'll see that inside one of the other formulas as well. So another formula to highlight too is, or ability within formulas, is to actually be able to look inside of linked records and pull out a value. So in this case, I'm trying to estimate a priority by first checking if the contact is what we consider a VIP. And if they are a VIP, we want to take that numeric value of the priority field and up it by 25%. Otherwise, we just use that standard value. And so in this case, what we're doing is we're actually looking at the contact that's linked to this bug. And we're looking at a VIP yes, no field. And we're saying if that yes, no is true or yes, then we want to count that contact. And then as long as that contact is found, if that count is greater than 0, oops, if that's greater than 0, then we want to up that priority. Otherwise, just leave it the same. And then I wanted to show too, so with that numeric value function for priority, what we're actually doing is if you're in a single select or a multiple select field, you have these 2 arrows here to expand the choices. And when you expand those choices, you can choose to include a value. And so in this case, we're saying a critical is a 75, a high is a 50, a medium is a 25, and a low is a 10. And so you can see in this case, we don't have a priority. So we say that estimated priority is 0. But if we were to say that this is critical and we save that record, that looking at Angela's not a VIP, Justin's not a VIP. And so we just give that estimated priority the standard value of 75. And then we could adjust the scale as needed. And then the other formulas I wanted to touch on were being able to not just look inside a linked record, but also get values from some of our complex field types, like our time tracking log, our full name field, address, things like that. And so what I've set up in this case are 2 different fields. One where I'm wanting to pull out how many dev hours were spent, and another where I'm trying to look at how many QA hours were spent. And when doing this, I'm just looking at our time tracking log here, and I'm pulling out the individual values based on who was assigned. So Nate is the assigned developer. I'm the assigned QA. And we can see Nate has tracked 2.5 hours. I've tracked 25 minutes. And it has those split up appropriately. And so if we look at the actual formula, what we're using here is a get list function. And so what this does is you say that you want to return a list of all of the values that match whatever condition. In my case, the condition I'm choosing is I want to look into the time tracking log and check who tracked the time. And I want to make sure that in this case, it matches our assigned to field for the developer. And then based on that, I'm choosing the field I want to return. And in this case, it's the reported time.
The text function is important there too. You may want to.
Yes, the text function is important. So by default, reported by is text. And with that assigned to field, we want that to also be text so that we're always comparing the same types to each other. Because by default, assigned to is also a complex field type. And so we just have to convert that to just a normal text string so that we can work with it. And then after we bring back that reported time, we store that in seconds. And so we're dividing that by 3,600. And then we're adding all of those values up. And then we're dividing it by 3,600. So you can see even for Nate's 2.5 hours, there are two different time entries, one for an hour and a half and one for an hour. And those both get added together in this formula. So it brings back everything that matches the criteria. You could even, I've seen some cases where people will add notes on whether it's billable or non-billable time. And you can check the note for that text and split that out again as well. And then the same concept over here for the QA field. The only difference is we're replacing that developer assigned to field with the QA assigned to. And then one thing I also wanted to show with that dot notation on being able to go through linked records like we did for this priority field, that's not just limited to one layer deep, and it's not limited to the same solution. And so let me pull up this example here. In this case, I just wanted to show how you can go multiple tables deep. In this case, I wanted to go through 3 tables worth of linked records. Those tables don't have to be in the same solution. They just have to have that linked record between them. And so in this case, when I'm in table 1, I'm saying I want to go through table 2's linked record, then table 3's, then table 4, and I want to look at that status field. And if that status is backlog, and using the and operator here rather than the function. So if the status is backlog and the priority is urgent, then I want to bring back the number and then add them all together. And so these linked records, you can see 1A is linked to 1B, 1B is linked to 1C, and 1C is linked to all 4 of these records. And so you can see 3 of these are urgent and backlog. And so it's 5, 50, and 500. 5,000 doesn't meet that criteria. And so when we go look back at table 1, we can see it's adding those up, even though it's multiple layers deep.
Brian, are these 2 solutions you're showing us, are they available for download as templates potentially? Or
I could share these. I'll have to double check with the software development. I know that was just created for the demo. And so I'm not sure if it has how much interconnectivity it has with other solutions. But yeah, I can share this and make sure that it's part of that packet you were talking about.
Also, we have a question on something you had shown previously, which is where can we see, this is from David Toon, where can we see a list of the default values for those such as reported by, defaulting to a text field, etc.?
In most cases, it will show you as you're typing the formula. And you can see here, there's all of these different icons. That's always the field type. And so when you're going within, for example, if we look at the time tracking log, we can select that time tracking log. And then if we use that period for that dot notation, you'll see we have the options of note, which is text, reported by, which is like the assigned to field, but also text in this case, reported on, which is a date, and then reported time, which is that number.
Excellent.
And so as you're typing everything, it will always try to autocomplete, or it will search for both fields and operators as you type. And you'll be able to select use, look inside of those fields. Anytime you do that period, that dot, now in link to accounts, I'm able to see all of the fields within the accounts table and select any of those.
So can I ask you another question?
Mhm.
Is that okay? I don't want to interrupt your flow, but we have an anonymous attendee who's very interested in a couple of these things. One is, and this might be a Peter Artem question, is there an AI assistant coming to help build formulas?
In fact, we've been looking at ways that we can use AI throughout the SmartSuite platform. And this is one just obvious area where AI would be very good at understanding the syntax, helping you model out a particular formula, or even correcting things that might be wrong. As you can probably tell in some of these longer ones, where all of your braces, the brackets have to match up, right? You need an open parentheses, a close parentheses, sometimes multiple of them. That's the kind of thing that AI could very quickly identify. So we're working on that, coming soon.
And we do have AI across SmartSuite already. It is available in our SmartDoc field as well as in a couple of other areas. And so we will have a different AI training session, certainly as we continue to develop there. This anonymous attendee also asks, who is new to functions, can you convert a complex field to a text just within that function without creating a simple field?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options, and we have all of the basic outputs that you would need. So you can use our text function to try and convert anything to text. In that other example here, I have this number function to convert this empty string into a number. And then we also have the ability with the date function to be able to turn text into a date as long as it matches. So if you had date and then a text field of the value, or if you just want to have a static 1/1/1970, you can have that as well. And it will convert it into SmartSuite's date output.
Excellent. Brian, I know we're getting close to time. Do you have another formula that you want to share, or should we continue with questions?
We can continue with questions.
Okay, we have a question that goes back to automations, and it's from David Zobak. Default settings for fields in a record is like an automation at record creation. Some fields allow for detailed defaults, but some don't. Will this be enhanced in the future? For example, checklists allow for default items, but not assignees or dates.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we'll continue to take a look at. We want to make everything as consistent as possible and give you the same type of capabilities across fields. We do have 44 field types, and in some cases there are slight differences. If there are particular ones that you're finding a setting like that missing, please do submit a feature request at feedback.smartsuite.com. We're looking at those things on a continual basis, and the ones where we get a bunch of people needing that capability, it helps raise it to the top of the list.
Thanks, Peter. And then we're back from our anonymous attendee. Is it possible to create a formula using the values of the same field and another field?
I'm not quite sure what they mean with that question.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either.
As you've seen in the formulas that Brian's putting together, we're definitely combining the values of multiple fields, even across multiple records, into generating an output. But yeah, if we get any more clarification on that,
Okay.
maybe we can shed more light.
And Sarah Rakor from Food Truck League asks, I noticed there's no way to add help text under the field name for a formula field. Is this something that is on the roadmap?
There actually should be. Yeah, we have that. I believe the title field is the only one that doesn't support help text right now, and we're working on that.
Okay.
That'll be available shortly. We're working on it as we speak.
Hopefully, Sarah,
But
that's
yeah, in this screen, you can see that you have to click on the below the field name option to get it to display in that way. And for those of you who haven't heard this, we've also enhanced the help text to support rich text. So essentially, this is a mini smart doc, and you can highlight and add bullets and all kinds of good stuff. And we've also increased the length. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Artem, it's 750 characters now instead of the former limit.
Yeah, I think 700 is the right number.
And Dimitri has a question about automations. Is there an automation to generate a text field with the name from the name of the attachments that are downloaded? So I think when you were creating the PDF and then reattaching it to the record, is that?
To use the name that but you could essentially do the same. You could do the same thing because you're building the name of the PDF with essentially elements that you type and or select. So what you would do is just create or update a text field with exactly the same combination of things to duplicate the name. Obviously, the .pdf wouldn't be included, but you could add that just as text.
Excellent. And so Wade Carpenter has a question about our AI model. Are we moving from ChatGPT 3.5 to 4.0 or 4.0 mini?
There are a variety of things going on there, and not to get into all of the details, but our ultimate goal is to give you flexibility to be able to select different models and potentially even different providers. So stay tuned there. We'll make some announcements as we get a little further down the track, but we're definitely exploring a variety of options. And yeah, I have people giving me opinions on AI models and which one's better. And ultimately, we would love to give you the capability of using the one that you need, especially for certain types of things where you're doing content generation in a particular industry or something. Maybe you've got your own LM that makes more sense. So we're going to be adding options over time to support more flexibility there.
So I know this isn't our what's new and coming soon demo, and I really do appreciate Artem, Peter, and Brian providing the oversight on all of these. I've left some interesting resources in the chat so that if you want to continue the conversation in the community, or if you'd like to join the Academy and brush up on some of these areas in video vignette training, or to become SmartSuite certified and register for our instructor-led training that occurs every month on the last Thursday of the month. All of those resources are available to you there, or you absolutely can reach out to any of us here at SmartSuite. I don't know if anyone can stay a little bit longer. We're over time. There is one more question. For AI, can you work towards a chatbot that lets you ask broad questions about your data with the option to save its output as a new report to add to a table or a dashboard? I know we already have that function in beta.
Yeah, really more alpha. That is an area that we've explored, and we've done some prototyping. Some of you have seen a bit of the chatbot that we've been working with. We're going to make improvements there, and I don't want to spill all the beans, but we're moving down a path to do some pretty exciting things with AI. So definitely stay tuned. That is an area that we're very interested in getting you more capability so that it has better SmartSuite and your data context and can give you interesting information about it.
I will tell you this, there's so much amazing stuff coming down the pike on our roadmap. We've gotten some requests we need an audio field. We also need notes and all kinds of things that people are interested in doing. I left an area for the product roadmap for you to request the features that you want. We really do consider those. It's part of everyday life here at SmartSuite, as you can see what we're delivering back. We are so excited about what's coming at SmartSuite. The team's working really hard. Everyone is putting in a full court press for this next release in 2 weeks. Artem, 2 weeks? What's the date?
End of August, let's put it like that.
Okay, end of August. But anyway, we're grateful to all of you for making this a possibility for us. We love what we do and we love doing it for you. So please join us for the next one, but also get back to us with any other questions that you have. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Peter, Brian, Artem, very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody. Take care.